Hi, I'm Jeremy Vendetti, and we're here at New Westminster at the start of the Fraser Delta. So we're about 35 kilometers upstream of Sand Heads. That is the end of the Fraser River as it enters the Pacific Ocean. To the east of us here is Port Mann, the Port Mann Bridge, and Mission, our last stop, is about 40 kilometers upstream of here. To the west of us here is the Fraser Delta, which starts right here at New Westminster. Starting up at Yallstrick Bar, where the gravel sand transition is, about 15 kilometers upstream of Mission, to down here is the sand bed reach of the Fraser River. The sediment in this reach is about 400 microns, the same size as we had up at Mission, and that size persists in the channel all the way out to the ocean. The channel here is single threaded. The mean width is about 700 meters, but the width varies from being 225 meters up to 1,200 meters in places. And the depths here are 15 meters deep. At high flow, during extreme floods, that flow might be even up higher, the channel might be deeper, and at low flows, it might drop down to around 10 meters. Downstream of here, the river begins to bifurcate into the Fraser Delta. And a bifurcation is simply a division in the river channel. They're very common in deltas as you begin to approach the ocean. And bifurcations usually have one dominant channel and then another channel that is gradually infilling with sediment and being abandoned in favor of a steeper route towards the ocean. Just downstream of here, where the bifurcation in the Fraser River begins, it splits into the main arm of the river, which is the dominant channel in the bifurcation, and a north arm of the river, which is gradually infilling and being abandoned. The main arm carries about 90% of the flow. The north arm takes about 10% of the flow. And the sediment roughly follows that division in the flow. The north arm then splits again into the middle arm and the north arm around Lulu Island. And the flow split there is about 50% goes one way, 50% goes the other. The main arm then splits again near the George Massey Tunnel and then goes into Canoe Pass. About 5% of the flow goes out to Canoe Pass. Of the remaining 85% of the flow in the Fraser River that goes down the main channel, about 14% of it flows out onto Roberts Bank, and 71% of it carries on down the river towards Sand Heads. We're a little lower down than we were a few moments ago, down right at river level. And you can see here that the Fraser River becomes a working river at Port Mann and going out towards the ocean. You can see in the foreground right here, Sapperton Channel with log booms tied up. On the far side is the main channel of the Fraser. Sapperton Channel is a back channel, and there's a large sandbar that develops in between them. On the far side of the river here, you can see a port facility. So that's the Port of Vancouver. And from Port Mann out to the ocean, this is a major port facility where things that we produce in British Columbia go out to the world, and where we bring things in from Asia. We are here right at the start of the Fraser Delta. So immediately upstream from here is Port Mann, and then immediately downstream is the first major bifurcation of the Fraser Delta. We first have the main channel of the Fraser that is carrying most of the flow. You can see here in the middle we have Anasis Channel that reconnects with the main channel not too far downstream. And if you look all the way down the sidewalk here, that's where the North Arm goes, and that takes about 10% of the flow and sediment as it goes through the Fraser Delta. Hi, I'm Jeremy Vendetti, and we're here at New Westminster to talk about the sediment budget of the lower Fraser River and Delta. So a sediment budget is a simple accounting tool where we look at the input of sediment, the output of sediment, and then the change in storage of sediment within a particular region, area, or reach of a river in this case. So if you know two of those things, either the input, the output, or the change in sediment storage within a reach, you can calculate the other. So if, for example, you have the input less than the output of sediment, then you are going to get erosion in a particular reach. That is a change in storage that is negative. If you have a surplus, you have an input that is greater than the output of sediment to that reach. And there, you'll get deposition. That is a positive change in sediment storage. Deltas are naturally places where the input exceeds the output of sediment, and that's ultimately how deltas are built. The sediment budget of the Fraser Delta is not well known, but it has been estimated, and the results are a little worrying. You will recall that there are approximately 17 million tons of sediment per year that come through the gravel reach of the river and then go past Mission, British Columbia. Of that 7 million tons per year, about 3 million tons is made up of coarse sand, and that's what makes up the bed and the lower banks of the Fraser channels. Historically, there was no change in the amount of storage between Mission and Port Mann, meaning that 17 million tons per year came all the way through, including that 3 million tons of coarse sand that built the delta. There was some minor aggregation in the delta channels downstream from here, but of that 3 million tons per year that was coming past Port Mann, all of it, or most of it, was going down to the delta front and building the delta front, prograding it into the Pacific Ocean. So the sediment budget of the Fraser River has changed, and that is the worrying part I mentioned a moment ago. We don't know the current sediment input at Mission, but we do know that it is somewhat less than it has been historically, and that's because of changes that have happened in the basin. We think also that there is ongoing erosion that is happening between Mission and Port Mann, and that's caused by something called the Nick Point, which is a change in elevation in the riverbed that has been migrating from the reach of the river that is currently dredged and migrating up past Port Mann towards Mission. And that's been adding about 1 million tons of sediment to that sediment coming downstream. We estimate that it'll take approximately 100 years before the river has adjusted to the new riverbed elevations that have been caused by dredging down in the delta channels. And so annually, about 3 million tons of material per year are dredged from the delta channels to maintain a deep water port here in the Fraser River. And the port, of course, is important. It's where our stuff comes from Asia, and it's also where we ship a lot of our raw materials out from British Columbia. But in order to have that deep water port, dredging has to happen in the lower Fraser River. So that information allows us to estimate the sand budget for the Fraser Delta, or re-estimate it based on changes we know are happening. And so if we assume that there's still 3 million tons of sediment coming in from Mission, that is the bed material that builds the channels and lower banks of the river, assuming 3 million tons comes in from Mission, and then from Mission to Port Mann, we know that there's erosion of about 1 million tons of sediment per year. That means coming down into this reach here, there's about 4 million tons of sediment per year that is delivered to the delta channels. Now in the delta channels, the dredging program takes out about 3 million tons of sediment per year. And what that means is there's only 1 million tons of sediment every year. That is that bed material that built the front of the Fraser Delta. There's only about 1 million tons of that that's getting out to the delta front. What that sediment deficit tells us is that the Fraser Delta is either eroding now or it should be eroding in the future. And that's the worrying part I mentioned a moment ago. And if we're going to manage the lower Fraser River well, we have to more carefully establish the sediment budget. And that means we need to know more about how much sediment comes in, how the elevation in the river changes, and then how much sediment goes out. And presently, we don't know any of those things.